In the last, I'd say 15 years, we've seen China particularly become really, really aggressive and really bellicose towards the West. They've been really, really aggressive when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to territorial waters, the South China Sea, but also just trying to muscle their ways into America.
Ready, set, showtime. Welcome to the Montana Majority Report. Quick, transparent, and informative. Get the inside scoop on policies, people, and decisions shaping our state, all in less time than it takes to pour your morning coffee. Stay tuned. Montana starts right here.
I'm Montana Senator Ken Bogner, and I'm here with the Montana Attorney General, Austin Knudsen. Today we are talking foreign land ownership and foreign adversaries. I passed the bill here in Montana to prohibit foreign adversaries from buying our critical infrastructure and our ag land. And now I'm currently working on a bill to prohibit foreign companies from buying our residential property, our homes. And I wanted to talk with the Attorney General on this situation because you have been such a huge advocate and used your office to really advocate against foreign adversaries coming into Montana. How did this become a priority for you in your office?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Senator. So, candidly, I've always been a China hawk, and this goes back to my time in my own time in the Montana legislature. But it's also just kind of been a personal passion of mine. In the last, I'd say, 15 years, we've seen China particularly become really, really aggressive and really bellicose towards the West. They've been really, really aggressive when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to territorial waters, the South China Sea, but also just trying to muscle their ways into America. That's why I'm really glad Donald Trump is back in the White House. But that's kind of where this started for me, just kind of a personal passion project. But we've done a lot since I've been in office. You were here last session in 23 when the Chinese spy balloon went over Montana. That was a big deal. At that point, my office, we had drafted an anti-TikTok bill.
Right.
And that came about because my Office of Consumer Protection, we launched an investigation into all the social media companies, what data they were collecting, what they were doing with it. But the one that really horrified my IT techs was TikTok. And the more we dug into TikTok, of course, Chinese-owned, Chinese company and ByteDance. Under China law, those Chinese companies have to cooperate with the Chinese Communist Party. And when we started seeing the kind of data and the stunning amount of data, personal data, that TikTok was harvesting, that's why we brought that bill to ban it at the state level. Well, then the Chinese spy balloon went over top. And,
right.
and that really, that really, frankly, spurred you guys to pass that bill.
Yeah, and you really led on the TikTok, being ahead of all the, the data collection and being out there, being loud about, hey, this is our data being stolen. And I had introduced the bill to prohibit foreign ownership of land before the spy balloon. And I was told, is this really happening?
Yeah.
Do we really need this? And then the spy balloon showed up in Montana that people went, oh, I guess this is an issue. Did you find that, before the spy balloon and working on TikTok, were people pushing back on what you were doing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. That spy balloon, that was the best favor Joe Biden and the Chinese Communist Party could have done for my office. Yeah, definitely. We had people, howling about, well, you're taking away people's joy and they just want to make funny videos on TikTok and, take pictures of their kids dancing. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, you're putting pictures of your kids on TikTok and you're now giving the CCP the facial recognition data of your children. High five.
Right.
Because that's literally the kind of stuff that the CCP and ByteDance was gathering from TikTok. But yeah, we definitely had people who didn't believe it was a problem, certainly did not believe it was a problem here in Montana. But the spy balloon went over. We now know they were collecting a ton of really nefarious data with that spy balloon. That wasn't just a weather balloon like China said.
Right.
They were steering it. They were flying it over our nuclear infrastructure, over our Air Force Base in Great Falls, over a lot of our electrical infrastructure in the state. And you got to ask yourself, why would China want to look at that? Probably nothing good.
No, and you brought up a good point. Montana's a border state, and it's not just owning ag land. We have nuclear sites. Can you talk a little bit about being a border state and having a northern border and what that looks like, protecting it, and if people are exploiting crossing the northern border? What do you see in your position?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, under the federal constitution, the international borders and the enforcement thereof belongs to the federal government. Now, we had to sue Joe Biden over that several times, and you saw states like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico really having to step up and do something themselves because the Biden administration was just not doing their job on the southern border. But we certainly saw it up here in the northern border too. I mean, here in Montana, we've got 600-ish miles of northern border.
Yeah, it's a lot of border.
It's a lot of border, and frankly, a lot of rural border. I mean, I'm from way northeastern Montana, up by the Port of Raymond. We've got hundreds of miles of seemingly unprotected northern border. The good news is it is so rural up there. It's very cold a lot of the year. I have stayed, since I got in office, I've stayed in really close contact with Customs and Border Patrol and their sector office headquarters, which is in Havre. I'm actually from the High Line. I know where Havre is at. So I've been up there numerous times, met with those folks. They were a bit apprehensive at first when I first went up there when I got elected in 21, but ended up being really, really good people, law enforcement professionals that really wanted to do their job and were being prevented from doing so by the Biden administration. But the good news is up there in the northern border in Montana, at least, this is the quietest sector of the northern border.
Oh, that's great to hear.
It isn't to say that we don't see some stuff happening, but candidly, we see more Mexican drugs trying to get north into Canada from the U.S. than we see drugs coming down or criminals coming down into Montana.
Well, now that you mentioned the southern border, I know we have a new administration now, but what did that look like for Montana with the previous administration? I mean, was that open southern border really affecting Montana, and how so? Oh,
it was a disaster for us. Yeah, I mean, my colleagues, the other Republican attorneys general around the country, I mean, it doesn't matter if they're in Montana or West Virginia or Georgia. We all say that we're border states now. And that's fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl and methamphetamine those are the prices we're paying here in Montana for the southern border being wide open. It's a wide open fact that we've got 2 Mexican drug cartels operating here in Montana. They control basically 100% of the illicit drug trade in Montana. So we're talking primarily fentanyl, but also all the methamphetamine. Montana still has a huge meth problem. We're starting to see cocaine, heroin, some of the other, I guess, more classic opiates kind of make a comeback. It's all Mexican drug cartel, 100% of it. And so when you had an administration and Joe Biden just throw the front door wide open, cover their eyes, plug their ears, and handcuff our law enforcement professionals on the border, that made the problem exponentially worse. Our state is absolutely flooded with fentanyl, and I don't use that term lightly. I mean, this is just what we're seeing. Our fentanyl seizure numbers in Montana just in the last 3 years have gone up almost 20,000%.
20,000?
20,000%.
Wow.
Put your head around that number. Oh. And that's just the stuff that we're taking off the highways and streets that we're aware of. We know we've got a big problem that's still slipping through. Our overdose deaths are up multiple 1,000%. We've got a real problem here in Montana. We're not a pass-through state anymore. These drugs are coming here. They have targeted Montana because they can make a lot of money here.
When you say they, that's mostly Mexican gangs, and how are they getting their supply? Does that go back to foreign adversaries outside of Mexico, or is there a relationship there?
There absolutely is, and it's one we talk about quite a bit. So primarily, the source of manufacture for these cartels is super labs in Mexico. Now we're not talking like a climate controlled, high quality control lab. No, this is a lot of these super labs are in a jungle. They're garbage. There's no quality control. The batch of meth they just mixed up probably had a batch of fentanyl in it right before they made the meth. They don't care. So it's very, very dangerous stuff. We're finding fentanyl just mixed in literally everything, stuff that we've never seen mixed before, and that's just either poor quality control by the cartels in these labs, or it's intentional. Either way, it's bad. But we certainly know that a lot of the precursor chemicals for the fentanyl, especially, are coming from China, and I think that's intentional. China's big on asymmetric warfare. If you look into any of their military doctrine, they know they cannot beat America on the conventional battlefield right now. So they're trying to destabilize our country any way they can. And by flooding America with drugs, they see that as a long-term tool to destabilize our society and give them a leg up in the future.
That's such a great point. That is the strategy, asymmetrical warfare, or, ways to affect our society through drugs and data, how you mentioned earlier. So really appreciate what you're doing in your office to protect us from foreign adversaries.
Well, we're doing what we can. I'm thankful that President Trump is back in office, because they understand the problem, and he's willing to stand up to China, not take money from them.
Right. So speaking of that, you're a Republican Attorney General during the Biden administration. What is that like?
Like beating your head against a concrete wall.
I can imagine.
Real similar. Yeah, no, it was very frustrating. It kept us very busy. I mean, we literally had, during the Biden administration, we had rules coming out almost daily from the Biden administration in the Federal Register. Very often they were not following notice and comment rule as required by the Federal Administrative Procedures Act. They're just shoving through rules. And a lot of these rules were stuff that they couldn't get through the Congress and the Senate. Right? I mean, we've all seen Schoolhouse Rock. We know how a bill becomes a law, right? You got to go through Congress and you got to go through the Senate. Well, that administration knew they didn't have the votes to do that. So they were just trying to do it by executive fiat. So we ended up, I think we sued the Biden administration at least 60 times just in my 4 years. Yeah. So, we were very aggressive. I'm an aggressive Republican AG. I kind of wear that on my sleeve, and so
we appreciate that.
I figure Montanans knew what they were voting for when they put me in office, and so. But night and day difference. President Trump gets elected, and now suddenly, we've got communication with the White House. They want to know what we're doing, how they can help, how we can help them. So I'm hoping a lot of these lawsuits will get settled, or we'll get them figured out at the executive level in D.C., and they can go away, and we can go back to focusing on what we do best here at the state DOJ, which is fighting crime and drugs in Montana.
Well, that is a big part of your job. But what is your favorite part of the job as being the Montana Attorney General?
Oh, boy. I really, really like working with law enforcement. Before I had this job, I was a county attorney in my little home county, Roosevelt County. That was a job I really, really enjoyed, working with law enforcement, prosecuting criminals. So now, as the AG, I'm in charge of some law enforcement agencies. I've got the Highway Patrol. I've got the Division of Criminal Investigation, kind of like our state FBI. But I really enjoy having the Montana Law Enforcement Academy. Every law enforcement officer in the state, Highway Patrol, local sheriff deputy, police departments, tribal officers, fish and game wardens, they all go through the Montana Law Enforcement Academy. We give them 3 months of training. I really enjoy spending time with them as they're learning to be professional law enforcement in Montana, working with law enforcement, being around law enforcement.
How do you recruit those individuals? Is there a line out the door waiting to protect Montana, or do you go out and you find individuals?
It's been really interesting. But between COVID and blue state politics, we've actually Montana's been the beneficiary of those really stupid liberal policies. We've had a lot of law enforcement professionals flee those blue states and come to Montana.
Good for us.
And that's very good for us, because a lot of times they're very highly trained, very, very good officers. We have to give them a little, I won't say remedial, but Montana, we have some constitutional specificities, peculiarities that we have to train them on in a short lateral class. But now, that isn't to say we don't still have challenges. Pay and retention for all law enforcement in Montana is really a problem. And I've gotten this from talking to Billings PD. Gallatin County Sheriff's Office, Missoula Sheriff's Office, Missoula PD, basically, particularly in western Montana, I mean, the price of living has gone up. Cost of a mortgage, cost of groceries, cost of gas. I mean, it just costs more to live on the western side of the state. That's been a real challenge for us. A lot of times these officers who are coming from other states, they'll show up, they'll interview, they'll love it. You know, wow, Bozeman's beautiful, Missoula's beautiful, Helena's beautiful. Yeah, I'll take the job. And then they get on Zillow or the MLS and start looking at the cost of a house. And they go, ooh, never mind. We're seeing that a lot. But it's also tough for troops and officers that are already here. I mean, it's just that cost of living is really hurting us. I can't afford to pay a highway patrol trooper enough to live in Gallatin County.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
a
a
problem.
real challenge for us. Yeah.
Okay. Well, to shift a little bit, I've got a personal question. I was told you are a gun geek. Is that true? And if so, how did you get interested in firearms?
I'm a bit of a gun nerd. Yeah, if it goes bang, I'm probably into it. My whole life, I don't know. I've always been. My grandfather was a gunsmith. He was an ammunition reloader. He was always tinkering with something. And even when I was little, I was always fascinated by it, and I wanted to know how it worked and try it. And then as I got older, it's become my passion, my hobby. I mean, some guys watch football on Sunday. I'm usually at my reloading bench tinkering with something. So. Okay.
If the Attorney General of Montana could own any gun in history,
oh wow,
what would you choose?
Ooh, maybe a Patterson Colt.
Okay,
you know, the first functioning revolver handgun. That's a really cool one. I'm a Winchester guy, so there's several older historic Winchesters that I'd love to have in my hands. A Smith & Wesson Volcanic. You know, those are super cool.
There's many.
Oh, we consider we can talk about this for hours. Yeah,
we could. Well, I do want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man out fighting crime, so thank you for being here. Really appreciate all your work on protecting Montana against foreign adversaries. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it, and thank you. I mean, the work you've done with the bills you're bringing. It's a real issue. We've seen China try to buy land next to military bases in North Dakota. Suddenly, they're putting up, towers, pay no attention to what we're doing here. We know what they're doing.
There was a spy balloon above Montana.
They want to know what we're doing even in these rural states. So we have to be vigilant, and thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. Attorney General Knudsen, thank you.